Hey, everybody. My name is Tabitha, and I am, in fact, an alcoholic. Thank you all so much for letting me join you all tonight. It's nice to see a couple familiar faces. Most of you all I've never met, so hi, friends. I am from Johnson City, Tennessee. My sobriety date is April 4th of 2017. Since that day, I've had nothing stronger than a goody powder, and for that, I'm forever grateful. So I'm just going to follow the typical format, kind of what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. I grew up in East Tennessee. I know it is not evident by my accent, but this is, in fact, where I'm from. I come from what seemed to be a very typical home. So I had both parents at home. They loved me a whole lot, and I felt that my entire life. I went to a small school. It was kind of a country rural school. So I was with the same class of kids from kindergarten all the way through high school. There were a whole 66 people in my graduating class. So everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody's business, as you might imagine. So for me, looking back on it, I can tell you that I was alcoholic at birth. It manifested throughout my life in a few different ways. But it's very, very clear now, knowing a whole lot more about the disease that I have, that it was there all along. So I can remember always feeling like I was the problem. I didn't know what that meant when I was younger, but I knew that there was something wrong with me and I wasn't like other people. So the way that looked is I felt like I got picked on a lot. I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. I felt like no one understood me. So there was this constant need to prove myself worthy of people's love and affection and attention. And so I feel like my very first taste of addiction was an addiction for attention. I would get attention in whatever way I could. So I was the class clown. I was a cheerleader. I clogged forever. Anything I could do to get myself in front of people and have them lavish me with attention, I was doing it. And as you know, all of them do, it wore off pretty quick. It no longer satisfied the need. So probably around the age of 7 or 8, I found myself with the habit of satisfying my needs with food. And so that lasted for probably the next, 20, 25 years. And so what that looked like was every time I felt bad, every time I felt lonely, every time I felt sad, I would eat about it. And so I would eat whatever tasted good, whatever made me feel better. And the result of that was a very, very obese, sad, lonely girl, which did not help my feelings of not fitting in and my feelings of not being a part of. So when I was in high school, was the first time that I dabbled with alcohol and drugs. I found myself mixing vodka with orange juice in little Tropicana bottles and sneaking those into the movie theaters. That was my very rebellious first attempt at drinking with friends. And that escalated quickly. And so I had no idea, of course, at the time. But looking back on it, what I see now is that I never drank like normal people drink. I always drank to seek oblivion. As soon as I figured out that alcohol would cure my problems. I couldn't wait to get more. And when I would get it, I would consume it as fast and as much as was available to me. Now, the odd thing for my experience was that somehow I managed. I was a good student. I had great grades. I worked all the way through high school. I was involved in sports all the way through high school. I graduated in the top 5% of my class. Of course, there was only 66, bear that in mind. However, education was easy for me. And so going from high school to college, I got a little taste of accomplishment. And so I decided then that my whole goal in life was to reach the top of everything that I did. And that nearly killed me, right? So I go to college, and at that point I'm drinking, partying on the weekends. That's the big thing. Now, when I drank, I would drink a whole lot, but it would mostly just be on the weekends. And so every weekend you could count on finding me drunk somewhere, regardless of what everybody else was doing. But through the week, I'm showing up for class, I'm going to work, showing up for my family, and nobody's really any the wiser to what's kind of being cemented in my future. So when I graduated from college, I had secured a job working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I had decided that that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to serve this population that desperately needed an advocate, someone to be on their side, someone to help them. And I felt like I could do that. What I didn't know is that alcohol had another plan for me. So I took a job working with a small nonprofit, serving people with developmental intellectual disabilities. And I did great work at that job, as to be expected, because that's what I do. I do everything as hard and as fast as I can do it. And so while I'm working at that job, what I discover is that it's completely socially acceptable for everyone who works in such a emotionally challenging and draining field to have a drink at lunch or have a drink every night at dinner. And so very, very quickly, I was drinking probably 3 to 4 days a week, extraordinarily excessively on the weekends, and then just enough in between to get me through. Now, during this time, I had married a man who was matching my drinking, and he was dabbling with some other stuff on the side. And I was so offended that he would dabble with other things. Like, I was drunk every weekend, and never batting an eye at that. But I was incredibly offended that he would engage in other things. And I was judgmental and just kind of gnarly about it. And that went on for about 4 years. And so the big turn of events that happened for me was that I had gone for a promotion at this job, and those people denied me that promotion. And I remember saying out loud, "How dare they? Don't they know who I am?" And looking back on it now, it's incredibly embarrassing and almost laughable, because we all know what that means. But that's where I was in that moment, and I was incredibly offended. And so I began to retaliate. Imagine that. And so if they weren't going to give me that promotion, then I was just going to quit, and they would have to do without me, and they wouldn't survive it. Obviously, y'all, they survived it. I nearly didn't. So I did in fact quit the job. And as you might imagine, my drinking spiraled kind of out of control. And so over the next 4 years, what I saw was what you all probably all experienced, right? So we bounce around from job to job, keep demanding that the world give us what we deserve while attempting to manage this alcoholism. And the alcoholism is continuing to spiral, and I have no idea what's happening. I just think that the world has wronged me. So eventually I got to a place where I was unemployable, and my husband had had all he could stand, and rightfully so. I put that man through unspeakable misery. And he basically said, this is not what I signed up for. And he divorced me. And that was a blessing in disguise, which I had no idea at the time. So there I am, divorced at 31 years old, a full-fledged alcoholic, and having no idea what to do. And so that started my, the tour that some of us take, the tour of jails, institutions, treatment centers, mental hospitals. And so I visited them all, and I visited them all frequently. I was 31 years old before I got my first criminal charge. And I was, in the year that I had turned 31, I successfully received 2 DUIs and 4 public intoxication charges. And that was within a 6-month period. And so I feel like that's just a snapshot of how severe the alcoholism was for me. I had gone to a local treatment center around here, and I had gone over the course of about 5 years. I had been in that treatment center 7 times, the same treatment center. And again, y'all, I do everything I do it 150%. So I successfully completed that treatment center 7 times. And during the course of my spiral in alcoholism, I met another man, shockingly, in the rooms of the 12-step fellowship, shockingly. And we were destined to keep each other sober. So you can imagine how that went. It was an absolute and utter train wreck. There were periods of abstinence, mixed with periods of absolute chaos and insanity. And the entire time, my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual fitness is just completely shot bankrupt as possible. And so in 2013, we got pregnant in the midst of all of this insanity, and being full-blown alcoholics, both of us, because obviously he was as well. We were convinced that we were gonna get sober for this baby. And as you all might imagine, I had untreated alcoholism, and the only thing I was doing to treat it was go to meetings. So obviously I didn't stay sober, and I couldn't stay sober for anything. I ended up having a miscarriage at 5 months, due to my inability to stop drinking, and I lost that child. And that was the point where I had decided that I was causing more harm on the planet than I could possibly do any good, and I needed to go away. And I saw no other way out. And the crazy thing is, I was going to meetings, and I was going to treatment centers, and people were trying everything within their power to help me, but I couldn't hear them. And I don't know why, other than we have to walk out our path, right? So I attempted on multiple occasions to end my life. obviously unsuccessfully. Thank God. And the last time I tried, I found myself in Woodridge again, which is the local mental health facility, the one where they lock you inside. And, I'm sitting there just trying to figure out, and it's making those feelings of sadness and loneliness and powerlessness even worse, because I can't even kill myself. And so just that level of hopelessness and desperation, which I imagine some of you all understand, is something I just can't, it's hard to put that into words. It's truly hard to describe that. But when it feels like there is absolutely nothing that can provide any level of worth to my life. One part I left out that I have to go back to, in 2014, I got pregnant again. And literally by the grace of God, I was able to stay abstinent long enough to give birth to a very healthy baby boy, who was the bright spot in my life. But again, I couldn't stay sober for him. So in the first 3 years of his life, I was in treatment 6 times, missed a calendar year of his life in treatment. So in 2017, he was 3 years old. He was with my mother, who is a perfect candidate for Al-Anon, but she refuses to go. She had refused to involve DCS in the process, thank God. So she had kept him the entire time and kept him safe from me, because I was a horrible mother. And so I'm sitting in that mental institution, and the father of my child, the man I met in the 12-step program, was in the fish tank, as we call it, at the medical center, which is basically the suicide watch room over there, because we were just not well. And we individually, apparently at almost the exact same time, committed to go back to treatment. And so I found myself in the women's inpatient treatment center in Johnson City. He found himself in the men's inpatient treatment center in Johnson City. And I started what hopefully will be my last trip through an inpatient residential facility. One of the pivotal turning points in that treatment center was when the director sat me down and said, "This is the last time you darken the doors of this treatment center. I won't let you back in. Either you leave today and you do something different, or you find somewhere else to go, because you're not coming back here." And y'all, that was just a light bulb moment. That was my safe space. I knew for years that if things got bad enough, I could always go back there. And she had taken that from me. And of course I was angry and upset with her for how dare she do that. I'm just somebody that needs help, right? But what she did for me was she set the ball in motion that I had to do something different. And from that moment forward, the willingness came. It didn't really come for me in that moment of hopelessness and desperation. It came for me when someone eliminated my only options. And so I decided to go to an Oxford house, which was against everything that I ever imagined I could possibly stand. So I left treatment in May of 2017, and I went to a local women's Oxford house where I lived for 10 months with 8 other women, and everybody survived. Nobody died. It was good. What those women taught me is pivotal in the woman I am today, and I wouldn't be who I am were it not for what they taught me. They taught me how to be a mother. They taught me how to be a friend. They taught me how to love other women, which I had no idea how to do. And for that, I'm forever grateful. And so during that period of time, I had been there about 2.5 months, and my sister overdosed and ended up in that same mental hospital where I had been. And my son couldn't stay there anymore. And so he came to live with me at the Oxford house. And it was one of those moments where I felt totally ill-equipped and unprepared. But God saw fit for me to step up, and it was time. And so that's precisely what I did. And I had to lean on that willingness that I had gained in the treatment center. And I became willing to let women teach me to parent my child. And I became willing to say, I don't know how to do this. And so I was working with a sponsor who I'd been with her about 2 months, and she had never sat down with me and opened the book. We had met multiple times, and most of it was just chit chat and getting to know me. And so I just got my child back, and I'm sitting in a meeting, and this woman's sitting beside of me, and she says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm really not." I said, "I don't know why, but I feel like I just want to run out of this building screaming." And she said, "How long has it been since you had a drink?" And I told her it had been at that point like 3.5 months. She asked me where I was at on the steps, and I said, "I haven't even opened the book." I said, "I read it while I was in treatment, but I haven't opened it with my sponsor." And in that moment, she offered to take me through the steps. And so I told the lady I'd been working with that I appreciated her, but I was going to try it with someone else. And I started working with that woman, and we sat down in the first meeting and did steps 1, 2, and 3. And I remember getting done with that third step prayer and thinking, this is what I've been missing. It wasn't a white light moment. There were no angels singing. It was just enough relief to know that I was closer to where I wanted to be. And so I utilized that third step prayer every morning and every night as I was told to do. And I started on 4th step, and I had no idea what I was doing. And like any good alcoholic, I'll complicate absolutely everything, and I overthink it. And so I'm going through this 4th step, and I'm making this list, and I'm trying to create a graph and make it pretty. And I showed her my work, and she ripped it up and laughed at me and made me start over and made me simplify and get stupid. And so that's what I did. And I brought back like a notebook that was just scribbled all over and written on different pages. And it was just an absolute mess. And it went against every fiber of my being. But when we sat down together and did that 5th step, I remember walking away from it with a brand new perspective on me being the problem. It was no longer about the fact that I didn't fit in or that I felt like everybody was different. It was much more about the fact that I couldn't get the world to fit in my box. I had constructed this box so long ago, and I don't even know where it came from. Like, I just created this box, and I kept trying to shove the world in my box, and it didn't fit. And when it didn't fit, I would get sad and lonely and angry and hurt. And that's the perspective I gained from that 5th step. And I learned a whole lot about all of the ways that I had used the trauma and the hurt from my past against everybody I'd come in contact with. And it was like I was, all of a sudden armed with all of this information. And so I needed to go out and do something with it. And thank God for the way they designed the steps, because, and thank God for a sponsor who followed the book to a T, because before I could go out and do anything with this information I'd been armed with, I had to do 6 and 7. And that was really the moment where I got some clarity. Because when I went to God in that process and got humble about kind of seeing the issues, but having no idea what to do with it, and not understanding these character defects and where they came from and why I did the things I did. I think that was the moment where some true relief came. just being able to say, okay, I now know these things, but I don't know what to do with it. And that's, that's when the answer came. I don't do anything with it, right? I give it to God, and I put one foot in front of the other and do the next right thing with the work. And so that's exactly what I did. I promptly went into 8 and 9. And 9's where the relief came, as you all know. 9 is the place where I got to truly see the way I had affected all of the people in my life. And I got to truly be a part of that healing process instead of being the one causing the pain. And that's where my healing started, and that's where my family's healing started, and ultimately that's where my community's healing started. My sponsor was huge on service work, and so from day one, when I started working with her, she had me going to aftercare every week, and she had me aftercare, something we do in the local treatment centers, where we go back in and speak to the ladies coming up behind us. And as soon as I had enough time under my belt, she had me going into the treatment centers doing H&I. As soon as I finished my 5th step, she had me start raising my hand in meetings that I could sponsor women. And this one woman, I had just finished the 5th step and done 6 and 7, and she asked me to sponsor her, and I was petrified, and again felt ill-equipped and unqualified. And I was certain I was going to screw her up and make her drink again. But the experience of getting to sit down with that woman and simply go through the book and share precisely what I had been taught was life-changing for me. And I think that solidified in me all the times that the book talks about we have to give this away. The book's clear that we do have to give it away. But the reality is, once you get a taste of giving it away, don't you just want to? Because I did. I was just so eager to share it with anybody who would sit down and listen to me. And I did what, I think a lot of people do. I was sponsoring the masses in the first couple years, and oh my goodness gracious. Would show up for every possible service commitment and agree to every committee and all the things. And I think a lot of us have to go through that to kind of figure out where our niche is and where we really fit in. And I got all the way through the steps, and I was still sponsoring the masses, and I had started working in the recovery field, which was crazy. I actually went to work at the treatment center where I had gone. And I remember that feeling of it just being so surreal. And I think the extraordinary thing for me, and I hope it happens for y'all, is like every year I get to look back on the previous year and see like the extraordinary change that is so unobvious in the moment. Like these big things that God does, and I'm oblivious to it until I really sit down and reflect on what that looks like. And so, today, gosh, y'all, today I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams, and every single bit of that is attributed to God and what he did for me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was brought up in church. I grew up in the Bible Belt in East Tennessee. And so I was no stranger to this concept of God, but I had no relationship. I had this conception of God that I feared, and that if I didn't live this perfect life, this God would kind of punish me for it. And for a long time, I believed that my alcoholism was in fact just that. It was a punishment for not being holy and righteous enough. And today I don't blame that. I don't blame anyone for that. I think it's just part of the walk I had to walk to be able to get to a place where I could truly appreciate what God has put in front of me. And so I believe that in my experience, all of the religious people I encountered, all of the people on the planet who, were maybe not so kind to me, all of those things were necessary for my journey, because otherwise I don't think I would have been able to finally hear what I needed to hear. And so I still work in the recovery field. But the thing that is so vital for my spiritual fitness today is to be able to sit down one-on-one and work with other women. I still sponsor women. I definitely do not sponsor the masses. I'm just not equipped to do that anymore. I don't think I was then either, but I'm definitely not now. But I attend meetings. My home group is the Broad Highway group in Johnson City. We meet on Thursdays at 7:30. I try my best to be engaged in the recovery community, and I hope that I continue to sponsor women forever, because it's, by doing that, I believe I get to go back through the 12 steps over and over and over again. There's forever growth steps that we do in 10, 11, and 12, and I do those, but I think that getting to sit down with another woman and start from ground zero and go all the way through is just an extraordinary experience. And when I get to witness God work miracles in their lives, just because they're a little bit willing, that's a really, really cool thing. And so when I'm approaching, I'm a little over 5.5 years sober, and I literally feel like a baby most days. I like to think that I'm definitely better than I was at day one. But I think I have a whole lot to learn. And the beautiful thing for me about the 12 steps and Alcoholics Anonymous is that as long as I'm open to it, I can always learn. And lots of times it's those people that are just coming off detox who teach me so much. They're the ones that can really teach me something pretty extraordinary. Because I don't know about y'all, but it's easy to kind of miss that stuff when we get caught up in the day-to-day lives. And I try so hard to never lose sight of what AA's given me, and make sure that I'm always willing to give that back and pay that forward, because there's no doubt in my mind that I would have nothing I have today if it weren't for AA and the people who loved on me when I was unlovable, and who grabbed me by the hand and kind of drug me along kicking and screaming when I didn't want to go. Couple updates. That beautiful baby boy is he'll be 9 next month. I've kept him alive. I consider it a win. He's extraordinarily full of life, and there is nothing on this planet that keeps me more in the right here, right now than that kid. In a shocking turn of events, that boy I met in the 12-step fellowship is sitting in the other room taking care of our child. Amazingly enough, we share a sober date of April 4th, 2017. And y'all, if you want to talk about a miracle, that's one. We individually committed to recovery. We individually worked a 12-step program. We individually decided that regardless of what the other one did, we would stay sober for our child and for ourselves, and to give back all that we had taken from the world for so long. And God saw fit to work it out, and we've definitely put in some work to make that happen. It was not easy, but we got to know each other in sober time versus all of the chaos and pandemonium from our history. And turns out I really do like the human he is. It was touch and go there in the beginning. I wasn't even sure if I was going to like him. But I do. And so that's been an extraordinary thing. I get to be a part of a lot of really cool stuff. And it's not really anything I do besides show up. And I think that was the one thing that I lovingly referred to them as old timers when I first came into the rooms, that they taught me, like, when all else fails, show up, do something. And that's what I do. And I find myself today, a few years later, utilizing all of those things that they used to say to me that used to anger me or upset me. I used to have a sponsor who would tell me if I wanted to drink to go make my socks. And I promise y'all, I have used that one on sponsees lately. Tell them to go make their socks, and it angers them just like it did me, but they make it through that 30 minutes and they hadn't drank. So that's a win. I can tell you that when I find myself restless, irritable, or discontent today, it all goes back to one line in the book, and I'd like to share that with y'all. I remember this standing out to me. I was about, I don't know, I guess right at 3 months sober. I had read the book of Alcoholics Anonymous at least 7 times, because I read it every time I went to treatment, because I thought somehow that was going to be the key that worked. But I hadn't really saw this line until that last time when I was sitting down with a sponsor and she went through it with me. It's on page 61, and it says, "Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well?" And just about any time I find myself restless, irritable, or discontent, I can go back to the fact that, I'm trying to manage well. I'm not turning it over to God. I'm not getting outside of self. I'm just trying to manage well. And I don't know about y'all, but left to my own devices, I really don't manage very well. About the best I can do is show up and give it to God and see what he presents for me to do. And then my responsibility is just kind of walk through whatever he presents. So I appreciate you all letting me share. I hope that was beneficial to somebody. I would like to do one shameless plug for the Appalachian Regional Roundup, which is coming up in March. We're going to have about 1,200 alcoholics all gathered at the Meadowview Convention Center. It's going to be a tremendous time. If you're not familiar with it, look at the website, Appalachian Regional Roundup. It's pretty awesome. I'd love to meet some of y'all face to face there. So thank you all for letting me talk to you.
Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you very much. You painted